want to tell you about a time when I tried container vegetable gardening at my house. This is the area that I had. I live in a condo, and I've got approximately 100 square feet to work with. And in reality, I've got a 2 meter by 1 meter area that I can put my vegetable plants in and grow stuff. So the first time I did this, it was dreadful hot like it's going to be today, and you'll probably see me sweating a lot. And I put in the pots, put in the plants, some great drip irrigation, fertilized correctly, and waited for my harvested tomatoes. Well, every time I'd go out to get some tomatoes, they'd be gone. I tried picking them when they were greener. They were gone. The only tomatoes I ever got out of this whole collection, I did about 5 or 6 different types of tomatoes, were the tiny little currant tomatoes, they're called. Not because they're up with the times, but because they're like the small fruit called currant. What happened? I did get 1 or 2 tomatoes, but if you average the cost out of what I paid for those tomatoes, it was a lot of money. I paid probably over 50 bucks for each of those tomatoes. Now I call this lecture the $30 tomato because that's being optimistic. What can you do to prevent this? Needless to say, I did some research after this happened. I am basically a professional horticulturalist. This is not only sad, but it looked bad on me. So this time around, I'm going to be trying something different. And I think I can prevent paying too much money for that 1 or 2 tomato fruits that I get. I am going to shoot for having dozens and dozens of tomatoes. We're going to take a look at all the costs that I've incurred growing these tomatoes, and we're going to divide them by the number of tomatoes. This is the first part of the lecture. I'm going to be showing you how to set it up, what my strategy is, what kind of pests you're going to be looking to prevent, what the best soils, the best pots, the best irrigation, and the best setup are. And there's a few other strategic things we're going to show you too here during this lecture, which I call How Not to Grow the $30 Tomato.
I don't really care, all I really want is just money.
I want to talk about pots, containers, what you're going to put these plants in. And I'm going to let you know kind of an interesting secret. There's all kinds of different pots and containers you can use. Raised planting beds, ceramic containers, plastic. What's the best if you want to get the lowest priced tomato? The best if you want to get the lowest priced tomato is a 5-gallon plastic container. Why? 5-gallon plastic containers have been proven to be the absolute best, most efficient size per amount of container. In other words, if you go with a bigger container, you get less and less tomato per container size. If you go with a smaller, the same thing. This is the maximum. Plus, it takes less water, and up until now, they're relatively easy to come by. I say up until now because I have a hard time getting these things, and the price has gone up incredibly. It used to be you could get these for a couple of bucks a piece at the most, but now I paid over $5 a piece for them. And it was tough to find them. I had to special order them as well. So all I can think of is that everybody, because of COVID, is decided to do backyard gardening. And of course, the 5-gallon pot is the mainstay for a lot of backyard gardening. Why a plastic pot? Wouldn't you rather use a ceramic? Isn't that more natural? Well, here's the thing. You can reuse these things quite a bit and keep them real clean if you sterilize them with bleach, Lysol. Wash them, and sterilizing them with 5% bleach is probably the best. You can really use these quite a bit. If you use ceramic containers, you can reuse them, but you can't sterilize them very easily. In fact, you'd have to put the whole ceramic pot in an autoclave. And it's tough to find autoclaves big enough for most ceramic pots. So these 5-gallon containers are the best for growing tomatoes on a patio in your backyard. How about using saucers for these things? Isn't that a good idea? Absolutely not. Why? A couple reasons. One, if you're using an undercomposted soil mix, that soil mix could rot near the bottom where that water is standing because it's an anaerobic environment. There's very little oxygen there. And two, basically you're creating huge breeding grounds for mosquitoes. The tiger mosquito and the other types of mosquitoes that are new here to Southern California require very little water, 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch standing water to reproduce. And so it's a very bad idea to use saucers or anything like it to keep the water from going out from where you're watering it. Now, you can use saucers if you remember to do one thing, and that is to empty them out when you water the plant, and a half hour later, go back out, empty that again, because water's still going to be coming from the soil that you watered in that plant. So I got my 5-gallon containers. Next, we're going to talk about the soil. What kind of soil is the best to use for this kind of vegetable gardening in your backyard?
I don't really care, all I really want is just money.
Now I want to talk to you about potting soil. You want to put potting soil, not planter mix, not amendment, into the pots. And why is that? Because potting soil has been formulated to stay in pots and do well in pots. It has a lot of extra drainage material, things like pumice, sand, perlite. This drainage material helps the water move through the soil, moisten the organic parts of it, but yet not puddle up to such concentration to where fungi that like that kind of thing, they like the soggy conditions, it keeps those fungi from establishing. You can even make your own potting soil if you go with about 50% sand and 50% well composted. And that's important because composting is a process of breaking down all the organic materials that microorganisms can eat. If you have a compost that hasn't broken down enough, you will get fungi, bugs, and all kinds of critters attracted to your pots. And the decomposition of that potting soil, of the compost, I should say, in that potting soil, will rob nutrients from your tomatoes. So I went and I looked around to try to find a potting soil that was going to be decent. And the problem was, again, because of COVID-19, everybody's doing vegetable gardening, and so there wasn't a lot of choices. I did pick one. I'm not going to mention the brand. I'm just going to show you a part of the bag so you can't see what brand it is. Yeah, this is it right here. And this is about 25 dry quarts. Why is that important? It allows me to determine how much I will need for my containers. I'm using 5-gallon containers. Each has 4 quarts. I'm sorry, each has 20 quarts in it. That's 4 quarts times a gallon times 5. It's actually less than that. It's closer to 3.5 gallons because you're not going to fill the entire pot. And so I have purchased, hopefully, enough of this. I've done the math. And I purchased enough of this to fill the five-gallon containers. Another thing about this particular product here is that it says it comes with fertilizer already. And that can be a problem. There are some potting soils out there that are pre-fertilized. In general, stay away from them. I'm getting this one because it was the only thing left, and two, the fertilizer isn't synthetic. It is. Let me read you the list of fertilizers here. It contains 0.18% of slowly available nitrogen from feather meal, soybean meal, and bone meal. So those are pretty benign in those concentrations in this soil. So I don't think I'm going to have a problem with the plants burning. However, if you put fertilizer in a soil before you use it, or you put fertilizer on your plant immediately after you plant it, you risk burning the roots of the plant, which will lead to either the plant dying or the plant stunting and just sitting there the same size for the next 2 months. Nothing, I gotta tell you, nothing is more discouraging than watching a plant stay alive but go absolutely nowhere. So, I've got 3 bags of this, 5 gallon containers. I'm hoping I did the math right. We'll find out in just a little bit.
I don't really care, all I really want is just
Okay,
money.
here we go. It's time to fill up these pots. Let's see how this goes. Well, it looks like 2 bags may have done it. Let's find out. The next step is to tamp these down and then look at them, see if there's a little that needs to be added. Let's find out. Alright, a little bit more needs to be added, so I have another bag. I figured about 3 bags should do it, and I think I figured right. Gonna have a little extra for potting up some other stuff later on. Cleanup comes later, of course. Alright. Now, this soil has come out of the bag fairly moist. And so usually I'd water it first if it was really dry and then plant in it, but I think I'm going to plant in it first and then water. So let me bring out the plants and show you.
I don't really care, all I really want is just money.
I want to talk about plant selection, especially tomato selection. Tomato selection is extremely important if you are going to be growing in containers. Why is this? Because not all tomatoes do well in containers. What you want to find, if you can find it, sometimes it's a little tough, you want to find varieties that are known as determinate. Determinate tomatoes will produce a large crop of tomatoes and then kind of slack off. They'll start on the road to slow decline. Indeterminates are tomatoes that keep going and can go throughout the season, and if you have a mild winter, they'll make it till next spring. Well, wouldn't you want one of those? Well, no. Why? Indeterminate tomatoes are very long, stretchy. They have a lot of distance between their internodes. This is an internode, the space here between one leaf and another. And as a result of that, they tend to use a lot of water. So they tend to dry out the pot they're in quite readily. Whereas determinate tomatoes, their foliage is thick, their internode distance is short, and so per square foot area, they produce a lot of tomatoes, and they don't use near as much water as a mature determinant that has grown all over the place in your backyard. Unfortunately, I could not find any determinants. Good determinants are varieties like Ace, Celebrity. There's quite a few others. Look for the D or determinant on the tag. What about heirloom tomatoes? Heirloom tomatoes are very, very indeterminate. They have a lot of distance between internodes, and they tend to be not very resistant to diseases, mites, and insects, which is kind of important. The reason that the determinants are pretty good with insects is that they're robust growing. If they have an insect challenge, as we call it, or infestation, they can recover quite rapidly when they're growing. Indeterminates, yeah, kind of, but the heritage or the heirloom tomatoes, they have a tough time because they haven't been bred with the idea of disease resistance in mind. A lot of these varieties came out in the 20s and 30s, even up until the 50s. They were bred for novelty because patents weren't very enforceable, and the only way you could make it as a seed company is come out with a new variety every year. Whether that variety did well or not didn't matter, because it was the novelty that sold the tomatoes. So this variety I have here is called Early Girl. Early Girl is an indeterminate, but I have no other choice because I could not find any determinants when I went to look for them. This late in the season, you pretty much get what you can get, and this is it. Nice thing about Early Girl, just like its name, it produces very early tomatoes, and Early Girl can produce into the cooler parts of the fall where other tomatoes are giving up the ghost and not producing at all. So this is an Early Girl tomato. I am going to plant those, show you how to plant those, and then water them.
I don't really care, all I really want is just money.
Let me show you how to plant these Early Girls, because there's a specific way of planting them that results in much more robust, thicker, denser plants. And that is, first thing you do is you take one of these. Let me get a bigger one here just to show you. Take one of these. That looks overgrown, doesn't it? But this is perfect for what I want. Take one of these seedlings, Early Girl seedlings. Take all of the leaves off up until you want to leave at least 4 to 5 or more leaves and the growing tip, of course. And so I want to take this and plant that, but I am going to plant it deep. Now I'm going to use my hands because I forgot to bring out a trowel. I suggest using a trowel, but if you can use your hands. Just remember to wash them right afterwards. So I'm going to dig a nice hole in here with my hand, and I'm going to plant this as deep as I can. And I'm also going to kind of lay this down like so. And that'll root all along the stem right there, and you get a much denser plant. This is a multi-setting watering wand, and I'm going to turn it on, making sure this, there we go. Now I'm going to let it run a little bit because it's kind of hot. That black hose can heat up really fast, but I want to water these with hot water. And turn it down just a little bit. So let's use this to get it down even further. Okay. And here we go. Use that soft rain setting on the nozzle and water that. And I want to water this until I start seeing water coming out the bottom. Still no water coming out the bottom. There we go. Still no water coming out the bottom. And still no water coming out. Oh, there's some coming out over there. And there we go. It's finally coming out. So I'm going to stop. And voila. Now, the next step after planting all these is going to be setting up the irrigation. And guess what? It's way too hot to set up irrigation here. So I'm going to do the rest of this in the evening when it's cool.
I don't really care, all I really want is just money. I want money. I want money.
Okay, everybody, it is evening time here, and it was hot today. We stopped because it was getting too hot. I planted one tomato. I didn't get it as deep as I wanted because I had to use my hands to dig the hole. Well, now I've got the right tool to do the job, a trowel. So I'm going to plant two to a bucket. You can plant 3 to 2 depending on what type of tomato it is. 2 to a bucket, and I have 10 altogether, so that should work out just fine. So here goes planting. Okay, I'm going to reiterate, want to plant these deep, so we need to take off these leaves right here off the side, anything small and growing on the side there, and we're going to plant it about this deep right here. Let's do that.
I don't really care, all I really want is just money.
As you can see, I planted as many as I could. I actually lost one of them. I lost one of these during the planting, unfortunately. It broke in half, there wasn't enough left to plant. I am going to irrigate them in. There we go. It's a little lower. There we go. Remember, I want to irrigate these until they come out the bottom. The water comes out the bottom. This soil dried a little bit during the day. I want to make sure that it gets plenty wet, so I don't have to worry about it tomorrow when I'm installing the drip irrigation.
I don't really care, all I really want is just money.
So, tomorrow I'll show you drip irrigation. And we'll create a custom tomato cage to keep not just raccoons, but rats, possums, and other four-legged critters, squirrels as well, from taking the tomatoes. And those guys too, they love fruit. I'm sure that if they had the chance and they knew about it, they would decimate tomato crops. Those are our local green parrots out there. So, I'll show you all the ways to protect your tomatoes, irrigate them, and we'll talk about fertilizing too. See you tomorrow.
I don't really care, all I really want is just money. I want money.
It took a while. I started this morning and I got heat exhaustion, and so I started again this evening. It took a while to get the drip irrigation all installed, and the process is pretty tough. Fitting the 1/4-inch pipes on all the little fittings they have there, you have to push really hard. But then I found a secret. I found a secret to doing this that you'll be glad I mentioned. Yes, heat the tubing up with a hair dryer or hair styler before you start pushing those barbs in, and you will be glad you did. Let's see how that works. Turn that one off. Let's see. That one's still being a pain. When in doubt, reset the whole thing. Alright, what's going on? I'm not going to mess with that. I am going to turn that off and then just check the system, see if it works. Okay, there we go. All right, let's go. Like I said, I am going to need to buy a new Y valve. So let's see if this is working. Alright, there we go. Hey, it's working. Number 1 is working. Number 2 is working. Number 3 is working. Number 4 is working. Number 5 is working. And this is not leaking. Not a heck of a lot. Alright. So, voila, it works. I'm going to have to come back and do some fine tuning. Next, I want to show you something. I want to show you my strategy. Or I should say, I want to show you some devices. Next, I want to show you some devices that may help you control the critters that will most assuredly try to eat your tomatoes. This is a motion activated scarecrow. It's an impact sprinkler that's activated by a valve that's controlled by a motion sensor. So when this motion sensor detects small animals approaching your tomatoes, it activates the valve, which then in turn activates the impact sprinkler, which swings around going brrrr, scaring the dickens out of rats, raccoons, possums, and other mammals that might want to eat your tomatoes. We're going to be setting this up and checking out how it works here in this garden. How am I going to do that? Well, I'll show you in just a little bit. I just want to show you one more thing that I got that I think may help or not keep rats, raccoons, possums, and other unwanted wildlife away from my tomatoes. What is this? This is approximately $40 of pure obnoxious. It's what is called a ultrasonic repellent. Does it work? The jury's out on that one. It does flash lights and make an audible noise as well, and it activates all of these by using a motion sensor. Let's listen. It uses regular AA batteries. Okay. So, Here's the, it's on, and now you have to turn the different motion sensors on. There we go. Hear that? That's different sounds, supposedly scare away different types of vermin. And then we have this lovely, look at that. There we go. And this is the ultrasonic sound. This is the one-size-fits-all sound. There's other sounds you can barely hear. You hear that? Of course you can't. It's ultrasonic. There's another one. Oh, I can hear that. I can definitely hear that. And I can hear that too. But then again, I have some weirdly attuned hearing to the higher registers. That's a lot of fun, isn't it? Now, you can imagine, this is probably a, I don't know what that scares away. I think that's a deer. But, the question is, will this work? Oh, that is quite obnoxious. But, there's two questions with this. One, will it work with the animals? And two, how will the neighbors react to this? If this is going on at 3 a.m. at night, this is not good. You're hoping the ultrasonic works. We're going to try it out. I hopefully have understanding neighbors. And finally, next week, we're going to be creating cages for these tomatoes. Our own cages. Why? I have not yet to find a decent tomato cage that keeps rats and other critters away from the tomatoes. I'm going to make these things out of snow fencing. Have you ever seen snow fencing? It has small it's about less than an inch as far as the mesh on it. Small hexagonal, it's almost like a finer chicken wire, and it's coated in orange plastic so that ostensibly the snow won't rust it out. I'm figuring this orange plastic will act as a warning sign. Hopefully, if it was, now you have to be careful with colors, because if you have, say, yellow plastic, what happens with yellow plastic? It attracts aphids, whiteflies, and mealybugs. So I'm hoping the orange doesn't do the same thing. Finally, let's talk about controlling pests on your tomatoes. Right now, I don't have much in the way of pests. They're starting out. I saw maybe one little leaf miner infestation. I'm not going to worry about it unless it gets worse. But inevitably, from my experience, I'm going to have run-ins with spider mites, aphids, maybe some whitefly, and if I'm really unlucky, the worst of them all, the chili thrip. What is a chili thrip? Chili thrip is a new invasive pest here in Southern California. It attacks roses, it attacks anything in the chili family, which unfortunately is what tomatoes are related to. They're in the Solanaceae, which is the solanum family, or the nightshade family. Tomatoes and chilies, both in the same family, and so I'll have to keep an eye out for chili thrips. Unfortunately, once you see the damage, it's usually too late. So hopefully I can have to inspect them really close. And here's where it wouldn't be a bad idea to do a white paper test. What's a white paper test? So you take a piece of white paper, you knock on the leaves up, you put it underneath the leaves, you knock on the leaves, and then you take a loop really quickly and you inspect it for anything moving around. That way you can see chili thrips, you can see spider mites, and you can see all the other tiny little insects that do the most damage. Anyway, we'll be seeing you next week with all that fun stuff. Hopefully I'll have the new Y valve in place, and I won't be leaking out more water than I'm watering the plants with. And if you're going to do this, I'd say go for it. It is a lot of fun. There's nothing like growing your own tomatoes, and even if your tomatoes cost you 30 to 50 bucks, they're well worth it. Thank you for watching How Not to Grow the $30 Tomato.